Good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. I am Fran Moisa, headhunter and talent advisor, and you are watching SHIO. If you haven't watched this before, this is a broadcasting channel focused on personal and professional development topics, where I will be interviewing various guests. You can click subscribe or follow depending on where you're watching, whether it's YouTube or Facebook. Now, this is the first live broadcast for 2021. Thank God we got rid of 2020. What a train wreck, right? So this topic today is going to be focused on helping you achieve your goals. Now, as we left train wreck behind, we are all going in hopeful, motivated, and like kids going in a candy store. Yeah, it's going to be better now, and we want to achieve great and big things, but sometimes we don't really know where to start. So I'm very grateful that Karl Grech, who has been a previous guest on SHIO, has agreed to join me. Karl Grech is a professional coach and leadership trainer focused on emotional intelligence. And today we're going to do a role play of a coaching session where we will pick a goal. The goal that we will be exploring today is saying no to people. And probably a lot of us struggle with that. But you can pick, of course, any goal that works for you. The purpose of this mock session is to help you go through a professional sort of mind map where you can identify and be aware of your goal, how to overcome it, and be aware of any limitations that are in your way. We have shared with you previously a worksheet that we will be using during this live broadcast. If you have not downloaded it yet, you can do so. Just check the comments where you can download the worksheet, because that's what we will be using throughout this coaching session. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Karl. Good morning.
Good morning, Fran, and thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Likewise. Thank you for taking the time to be with us on this Saturday. I know we all have things to do, so I really appreciate you giving up your time to be here today. So, Karl, I've already briefed our audience that you are a professional coach and a trainer, but probably a lot of us have never been through the process of professional coaching. Can you tell us a little bit what coaching is?
Sure. So what happens with coaching is I partner with my client, and we go through what is called a thought-provoking and creative process. So it's a, so to say, question and answer type of aspect where I pose most of the questions and I help the client to find out more for themselves. I believe that we have lots of potential, all of us. Each and every one of us has lots of potential, and sometimes we don't even realize the potential we have. It's just like we keep ourselves back up on something, whatever it is, and then we get to do it and we say, it wasn't as hard as I thought it was. And that is what I do and how I support my clients. So, for example, if we were to engage a personal trainer to help us in training or achieving our fitness goals, the personal trainer is not there to teach us how to do push-ups. We probably all know how to do push-ups. But the personal trainer is there to keep us accountable. So what I do is I support the individual by keeping them accountable to their goals, helping them to decide what goals, what action they're going to take on a particular area, and then ensuring that they do this. So just like a personal trainer, ensuring that you show up, you're constantly there. And what is very supportive of coaching, I find, is that when you are accountable to someone, you feel that someone is there, so to say, let me use the word chasing for lack of a better word at the moment.
Yes.
You feel you need to do it, so it's just like you told, we're speaking about our children earlier on, you promised your daughter something. If you don't do it, then you might have to suffer the consequences. So
for sure I will.
So likewise, it's maintaining, so to say, what you said you're going to do.
And throughout your career, Karl, you have worked with both more junior professionals that are trying to find their way through the working world, but you have also coached and advised senior level executives. In your experience when working across these two different spectrums, what has been the ingredient that helped your coaches achieve their goal? What was the key ingredient that they need to have?
So, okay, what I think helps is having a sounding board. So, as a coach, I am their sounding board. So, sometimes leadership can be very lonely and not being able to share your ideas, your thoughts with anyone because you're not sure, you're uncertain about certain things, or you might want to really just share something with someone, but in confidence. So, coaching helps the individual to open up in a, so to say, private, confidential conversation, a very comfortable space, so to say, where the person can really speak about anything specific that is going to help them, or something they want to achieve, something they want to resolve, perhaps. What I do as coaching, which is maybe unlike mentoring or unlike therapy, I look at the future and I support the individual what they want to do. So I will not give advice. I will not tell them do this or do that. My role there is to support them and help them to identify what is going on around them and what is the best action they should take in the particular circumstance.
Perfect. So a little bit like the therapist as well, huh? You
Like, what
just
was that?
like a little bit like their own therapist. You know, you're guiding them to find their own answers and their own way of doing things and achieving whatever it is
In
that
a
they
way,
want to
yes,
achieve.
but the difference in therapy looks backwards. What has
Mm.
happened? How has that affected you, etc. Coaching looks more forward-looking. So, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to do this? How are we going to support this area? How are we going to achieve?
And can't we all do with a little bit of looking forward? Huh? Yeah, I think we can all do that. Just to remind our audience, if you're watching, please like and subscribe so we know that you're here. You know, send us your likes and your loves and whatever you want. And if you have any particular questions as we go through the session, you can ask them live through the comment section, so either on Facebook or YouTube, depending on when you're watching. So what we're going to start doing now, we are going to start the role play, the coaching session, the mock coaching session, and we are going to share the screen with you where we will go through the worksheet. If you have not downloaded it yet, I'm just going to put it there. You can find it in the comments, okay? So just download it so you can work through it with us together. Okay, even though we're not next to each other, we can still work through it together. Now, the goal that
What I could
we would,
add, Fran, if that's okay, is
yes,
even if they haven't downloaded it as yet, it's fine because the way we're going to role play it, if they have just a pen and paper next to them, it's probably sufficient for the moment. So
definitely.
no need to struggle about it. We can just jump into it.
Perfect, perfect. So we're going to start sharing the screen with you now. And Karl is going to guide me through achieving my goal of saying no.
Great. So as you said, this is the download, and what we're going to do, as you will see in the first few pages, the focus we're going to start off with is identifying your SMART goals. So before we, so to say, start the role play, what is a SMART goal? SMART is an acronym standing for, first of all, specific. So being, what you really want to achieve. What are you focusing on? In this case, we're focusing on being able to say no. Measurable. So it's important it is measurable. How do we know that you are saying no more often, for example, specifically in this case? What is going to be the way you're going to measure it? Is it for something in particular you have in mind? Is it specific projects? Maybe you want to refuse particular projects, so you can spend time in other work, maybe saying no to work that comes after a certain time. It could be also saying no to our devices, perhaps, and putting them aside and closing them off so we can spend some quality time with the family. It needs to be action-oriented. So that is something we have control over, something we can do about, of course. Action-oriented, meaning that you know, we're not going to say, I'm going to win the lottery. That is not something action-oriented that I have control over. We're not going to say, no, I want to make sure that I enjoy all the sunny days, and every day is going to be sunny because I have no control over the weather. But we can say, I'm going to carry my own weather, so to say, and be irrelevant of the weather. I'm going to have a great mood, realistic so that we know we can achieve it. And the goal you've selected, Fran, saying no is definitely something, let me say, not an easy task, especially for some of us. So we cannot say, come tomorrow, I'm going to say no to everything. You might need to work your saying no in a process form and start by maybe the easier places to say no to, and then work up your way to the bigger no's. And time bound. So by when do you want to achieve this? Putting some sort of deadline. I like to think of it as well as from X to Y by when. So currently, maybe we can say from, always saying yes to being able to say no, or maybe saying yes on my own terms by a certain time frame. So from that, Fran, what would your SMART goal be?
Putting you on the spot here. So my specific is to be comfortable in saying no to things I don't want to do, or they have no value for me. Measurable. So when you have achieved it, probably when I can breathe easily. For not saying yes to so many things. But for me, the measure of it is I would know I would have achieved that goal of being selective with my time and my involvement when I will gain more time in doing the things that I enjoy or working on projects that I want to um, to do. Action oriented. Okay, so you've mentioned that this has to be within your control, and yes, I think having the ability to say no is something that we can all control. So actions that we take is to identify where perhaps I have been involved or I am about to be involved, whether it's aligned with what I want to do, achieve, and what I value, and whether it is a true proposition for me to say yes or no. And time bound has a deadline. Like you said, I think sometimes certain goals, especially like this one that we've chosen today, are perhaps having thorough implications throughout various areas of our lives. And it's important to be realistic about that and to work your way through certain levels of comfort until you reach that desired level. So the time bound perhaps would be, in my case, to start small and develop my confidence throughout.
Great. And what we'll do then is I would encourage you to write this in some sentence, some one sentence or one liner. What is important when we do this and we write our goal, we always think of, has it happened? So to say, writing it in the present and also positive. So you would try to keep this as positive as can be. So, and another way of doing this is also trying to think, Fran, so thinking now that I'm saying, let's fast forward in the future. And you're saying no more often, and you're happy with the way you're saying no. What would it feel like? What would it be like to be that kind of Fran?
Liberating in the sense
Mm-hmm.
that I feel that I would have more time to dedicate to things that bring me joy and are in alignment with my values and what I want to do. And empowered. I would feel more empowered because I feel like I have a real opportunity to express myself and to choose what works for me.
So possibly what we could say is in a sentence that you're feeling freer, so to say, you're feeling more in control of your life, you're happier and you're able to say no, or we could say you manage the requests that come to you better,
Yes,
more or less, of course.
indeed.
Great. And it's great to see some people joining us. We're seeing Romina saying good morning and Giselle as well.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Romina and
Great.
Giselle.
So let's move on to the next stage then, and that is our motivation.
Hmm.
In assessing our motivation, Fran, we would see why do we want to achieve this. So if I were to ask you, why do you want to say no more often, Fran?
So I have more time for the things that I enjoy.
Okay. For example,
So in my case, to have more time for my family
mhm,
and on a professional level, to dedicate more time to my own professional development as well.
great. What could be the pain, Fran, of not achieving this goal?
Mm. Well, it'd probably be the reverse of the why. Um, so having less time to spend with my family and having less time to work on myself, because then my energy would be directed on working uh, in situations that are not aligned with what it is that I want to do.
Mhm. So from now, from our discussion so far, our conversation, what is becoming clearer to you?
Um, the pain or the downside of not achieving this goal. What you said at the beginning, that coaching looks at the future, now I see it. um, I understood it when you said it, but now I can actually under not understand because I understood it the first time, but I feel it. I understand it at a higher level in terms of implications that it
Mhm.
has and the impact it has onto my personal and professional life as well. So what's becoming apparent for me is the cost of not doing this.
That's a great point. So what we're seeing is the value of you achieving your goal. How are you going to benefit? And of course, as you said, we're seeing as well maybe the downside of if you don't achieve this, then what is going to happen? You know, you're going to be overwhelmed, you're going to be stressed. Maybe this is going to reflect on family um, and the people you love around you, etc. Great. So how about we move on now to the next stage, which is the obstacles here. So here in
Mm,
obstacles, what we're going to do and what the intention is, and of course we're progressing through the sheet, but everybody can spend as much time as they want on a particular area as they feel the need to. Um we need to be aware of what is going to keep you from achieving this goal. So what are your stumbling blocks? And sometimes it could also be yourself. So how are you keeping yourself from success
mm.
in this area?
Um, I think that's a good point. Sometimes we are our own worst enemies. In my own personal case, and again, I'm wearing the heart on my sleeve here, so this is a bit uncomfortable, but for the greater good, let's go for it. Is that in my case, what would be stopping myself is having this desire, which have always had throughout my life. When someone asks me for my help, it's almost impossible for me to say no. I will bend over backwards, a lot of the times to my detriment. So that is a personality aspect that it has gotten better over the years. It's still not where I want it to be, but it has improved. So my own comfort level, I think, would be one of the obstacles. And secondly, and perhaps this is not necessarily my personal experience, but with people I have discussed throughout my life, what I found, especially in a business situation, um, the obstacle in saying no, perhaps to your boss or to clients or suppliers, or whatever business interaction one person may have, is the fear of losing that person or that client or that employee. So I think that is a real fear. And even from the employee perspective, if someone, if your boss gives you and tells you, Carl, you need to do this, sometimes it can be very hard to say no because of the repercussions. So one other obstacle would be, our own valuation and assessment of the situation to identify the risks, the positives and negatives, and the perception that the recipient would have upon me saying no.
That's a great point, Fran, and this is really true. As human beings, we always want to help and we want to support each other, and that is a very important aspect. However, also, why don't you keep in mind now, if you say yes to everything and to everybody, what is the downside of that? How is that affecting you?
um, Emotionally, it takes a lot of mental space to be there for everyone at every time when perhaps you don't have that capacity. From a mental perspective, the time constraints as well. If you're running from one point to the other, from one task to the other, or from one person to the other, you tend to overstretch yourself. You spread yourself too thin, and then you can experience, I experience, like I said, I'm going to be very honest, anxiety, and also a feeling of not absorbing what's going on around me. Sometimes I feel like I'm in a movie and things pass me by and I can't make sense of them. And sometimes I find it very hard
I
to
want to just stop
absorb.
you there a minute, Fran, because I'd like to ask you, how does all this affect your work then?
Mhm. Um, I've
And your,
gotten better over time, as I've
Mhm,
mentioned. So, not so much anymore, but to some extent, it can happen that I try to give in to all of the demands rather than sometimes perhaps question some of the demands.
mhm,
And I want to make sure that the other person is being listened to, feeling happy and
mhm,
valued, but I forget
mhm,
about me.
mhm. And I think this now brings us to the element of assertiveness, because what you're saying here is that you're giving everybody the attention they need, but you're not focusing on yourself. So, uh, and that can reflect badly on you in the sense that it has these repercussions, as you said. Maybe
Mhm.
you mentioned specifically, it hasn't affected your work as such per se, but it can affect you on a personal level. Um,
Indeed.
and so definitely it affects the relationships around us, because if we are feeling stressed, if we are anxious, it is likely that this is going to rub off on anybody we interact with, whether family or friends, because we are social beings, so we feel. Um,
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Carl, especially in my situation. It tends to sort of
mhm,
overflow into personal interactions. And, I can find myself being perhaps less patient, more on the edge, and like like the smallest things
mhm,
can trigger because there is a build-up of
mhm.
frustration and
So
then
what is the
consequently.
effect, Fran, of these triggers? So what happens? How does these triggers come out?
Uh-huh. In you see, I never probably looked at them very, very closely. So I'm going to need a moment here to sort of collect my thoughts and see. But on the top of my head, it can be something very simple as snapping at people. I
Mhm,
will give you an example that actually happened yesterday. I was really, really busy yesterday. There were a lot of things going through my mind, and my daughter asked me something, and my reply was like, "Not now," which I felt really bad about it. I could have phrased it most certainly in a very, very different way. So that's one of the ways that it manifests itself.
mhm, mhm,
Other times, it can manifest itself as putting a lot of pressure onto myself to deliver across the board, which gives me very little time to sleep or to relax.
mhm, mhm. And here we're picking a number of aspects, and in a typical coaching session, I would keep these aspects in mind, and I would even ask you specifically. So, what would you like to focus on now? You know, we've mentioned this anxiety aspect, we've mentioned the relationship aspect, but for the context of today's session, I'm going to keep it within the saying no. So, and I'm going to give you a tip here. If you were to look back on the situation of yesterday where your daughter asked you for something and you told her not now, what could you have done differently? Or how could you have worded differently? As you said, you said you felt you would have worded
Yes.
differently.
I would, if I could go back in time, what I would have said to her, it would be, Susie, can you give mommy 5 minutes? I need to finish this and let me come back to you and we're going to have a chat. And then I would actually put aside the time that I've promised her and actually listen to her rather than going, not now. That was bad, wasn't it?
Fran. So basically, as you mentioned, so telling her in a way that, you're really important to me. I'd really like to spend time with you. At this time, I need to finish this piece of work, but I will definitely dedicate the time to spend with you. And we could use this pretty much with people all around us. And I think it is very meaningful because people realize that how important it is and that you really want to dedicate the time with them after all, because I'm sure we've all been through the situation where someone has just attempted to listen to us, but we know that deep down their mind is elsewhere, and the feeling that leaves on us, which of course is not a helpful feeling. And then you start thinking, okay, why should I go and speak to this person again? Because I know that he's going to be busy, he's not going to have time for me, he's not going to, the way I need, etc. So that is very meaningful. Shall we jump into the next part of the section? And here we're speaking about setting our level of goal. So what we mean by here is, and this could vary, it could vary from the aspect of time, quality, quantity, but it's setting a minimum target, perhaps, a target, what we'd really like to achieve, and then the extraordinary. So what would be the best situation? So here you would think of the needing to say no aspect, and what would be the minimum you would expect from yourself in order to say no in this area? Be happy with?
To be happy with. So, I think immediately what comes to mind in my case, the minimum goal level is to be able to immediately say no to things that are completely out of my interest and value system. Okay. So I'm trying to think of an example that I could give and by what I mean by that. Not
You mentioned some examples already earlier on, perhaps. You mentioned that people are coming to you for advice, for support, and the need to say no then, for example.
Yes.
To recall the examples you've given earlier.
Yes, or to not necessarily say no outright, but to define the expectations from my side. So, let's say someone comes to me. Okay, so I'll give you a very good example. The rest of the day after this, I have something planned with my daughter. We're going to do something together. I'm going to do crafts and everything. Yay, me. So, someone has asked me to help them with something on a professional level. Now, immediately my instinct was yes. And then I remember, oh, I'm doing this coaching session with Karl. I'm gonna. So I said, I would love to help, but not today. I am available on whatever date it is that I gave them. And this has made me feel good. And I just want to bring up one comment we had from our audience,
Sure.
from Alfred. which is relevant to exactly the point that we're in at the moment. He said that I believe that what Fran is saying is common to a lot of people. COVID didn't help in being decisive in relation to saying no to customers out of fear of losing them. Like I said earlier, I think a lot of us
And
can
he's
relate
continued
to.
a bit further on
Yes.
as well.
Oh, yes. But unfortunately, some abuse of our goodwill to help. And this can happen when, like you said, Carl, when we don't set our boundaries. So perhaps a helpful tip is for us, and this is what you gave me now, and you made me realize. So, it's like the glass cracking. Boom! Now I see it. It's like it's empowering. I can see it. Perhaps it, like you said, it was always there, but it was never uncovered. Is that when discussing, when interacting with people, we need to know what we are comfortable with and our level of comfort, and to share that with them. Obviously, the way that we share that is very important. So that's another goal level for me, is to how to communicate better without being abrasive, without you know, creating a defensive reaction in the other person. So how to communicate in a healthy way. So the quality of my communication, what would that be?
Great. What I'm going to do, Fran, because and I'm going to link whatever you're saying. I'm going to move to the next part of this, so to say, the next slide. And I lost my mouse for a minute. There we go. And I really like that you've had this, what I like to call aha moment here. That is what happens in coaching. You realize, and as I said earlier, we have the answers, we have lots of potential. And all I do as a coach is support the individual to help to get out those answers. So definitely a way forward here would be, first of all, starting off by what are the values? Why do I need to say no? What do I want to say no to? Now, maybe the word saying no as well might sound negative. Nobody wants to hear the word no. So it could be you're saying yes, but you're saying yes in your own terms and on your own terms. And I think this is quite impactful what you mentioned. So you mentioned an example where you haven't said no to this person. You've said yes, but you said yes on your own terms. And that has made you feel happier, made you feel more in control, made you feel more empowered. And of course, indirectly, you feel more assertive. And so to say,
Uncomfortable.
sleep at night as well.
Yes.
Because you don't have all those things on your head that you still have to do. So this brings us to this part and saying, how do I want to be different? So how do you need to be different? And here you could think as well of what do you need to start doing as Fran in order to be able to say no or to say yes, but on your own terms? What do you need to stop doing? Or how are you going to be the person you want to be? So what do you need to be doing differently?
So I think the first step would be to take the time to consider whatever request is there in front of me. And I've actually noticed this for the past 2 weeks or so because of social media. We get messages and a little photo appears when you've read the message or it is delivered, which is, absolute pressure on someone. It gives me like massive anxiety and it triggers me. And it's like, yes, I've seen your message, but I feel compelled to reply immediately because the person knows I've seen their message, even though I don't want to reply immediately or I need some time to think. So that's a lot of pressure. And I think for me, the first thing that I would need to stop doing is to feel the need to respond immediately. And I think we could all do with realizing the habit that social media has created in ourselves, to engage and interact immediately, which limits our ability, especially in my case, and I'm being very, again, honest and raw here and very candid in saying that it has limited my ability to process whatever it is in front of me. because of the immediate expectation to react. So for me, I need to stop reacting immediately and give myself that time to process, whether it's a minute, 2 or 10 days, it doesn't matter. It depends on the question at hand. And I need to accept the fact that people have to respect that, basically.
Yes, and so what you're saying is that, in fact, our brain works in that way. We have two parts of the brain, in a way, or to explain it simply. One part is the part that goes fight or flight mode. So I'm going to do this, and you do it right away. The other part is the thinking brain. And you need to, being more aware of this situation, being more aware of the fact that you are responding to social messages, etc., right away, and it's creating you anxiety if you don't, is already a start. So the first step would be being aware of it. The second would be putting your thinking brain or in mode and saying, okay, now what am I going to do about it? It could be simply, I'm going to put this aside and then I will answer in a time. You could also say, I'm going to block some time in my calendar to respond to all these messages. And in that way, you're taking control. So you're saying no to social media for now, and yes, when you're comfortable to deal with it, so to say. And it's true, this social media, emails, etc., that's what it's triggered us. But it is, as you said, a self-belief, that you believe that people are expecting it right away.
Correct.
So putting it aside and saying, I'm going to tackle it when I feel comfortable to do it, is taking control of all these aspects. If we were to move forward, because I think it helps us in this area, because I think it's linked to what you're saying as well, is now what resources do you need? So, or perhaps as well, is there anyone who can help you around? And I'm saying this as well, because when we have a goal and we intend to achieve something, when we share it with someone, it is likely that we're going to be made more accountable. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a coach. It could be someone special to you, someone close to you. It could also be a colleague, and you would say specifically, I'm going to focus on this, and I really need your help to do this, So what would be the resources you need, Fran, in order to be able to achieve and be able to say no?
Well, you, number one, coach.
It will be my pleasure to support you, definitely.
So that will be number one. And I think number two is rather than a resource, perhaps it is a personal resource, if that makes sense. Because when someone tells me the word resource, I think of something very tangible. But perhaps a mental resource I will need in order to achieve this goal. So I would need to identify what my priorities are, be honest about those priorities that are important to me. That's a bit of an oxymoron, priority is important, but there we go. And to practice those throughout my interactions with people, whether personal or business-wise as well.
Mm-hmm. So based on that, Fran, what would you like to commit to for yourself?
Oh, we have to commit. So, what I would like to commit to. Self-honesty, number one.
Mm-hmm.
So what are my values? What's important to me? What works for me? What doesn't? Two, I would like to commit to taking the time to evaluate what's in front of me. So not to respond or react immediately, but to give myself the time to run it through my priorities filter and see whether this is something that can be worked out or not. And number three, the commitment would be to freely express it to whoever it is that I'm interacting with.
That's great. And what we have come up with are already some actions. So if we were to think, what would be the easiest steps that you can commit to next week that you do from the ones you mentioned?
So evaluate what it is on my plate at the moment and see, like I said, what works with my priorities, the ones that don't work, to identify them and to see ways that I can improve the situation I gotten myself into. That would probably 1, 2 steps, and to work on understanding again my priorities better.
Great. And if I were to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being you're really confident you're going to achieve these goals, and 1, maybe I've said them, but I'm really not convinced I'm going to do it. What would you say to yourself?
Well, it's going to be quite a high number because I've been working through this for quite some time myself, as the repercussions it had upon my life had been quite impactful. So I had to take action. So I would say that I'm feeling fairly confident. I will put it at an 8, probably because I think that there is always room to improve.
Okay. And that is bringing your perfectionist in the
Yeah,
so to say.
yes,
If
I
I were
guess.
to ask, because what I'm doing here, Fran, is I'm gaining your commitment. Is there anything that we could do in order to ensure we get closer to a 10? 8, and I don't want to be misunderstood, 8 is a very high number and it's excellent to have an 8. And we can be happy with that. But what I want to ask is there anything we could do within this conversation to ensure we get closer to a 10?
Mm, yes. And I think we would be going slightly off tangent, and it's a topic that we've covered in a previous broadcast, but it would be communication. So, how to communicate effectively, how to get your point across by being inclusive of the other person, by being aware of the implication it has on the other person, but at the same time, trying to have a balance between the two.
And I'm going to go back to your actions because if I recall correctly, and I haven't taken note, I have to be honest, I should have taken maybe some note, is you mentioned specifically that you want to see what's on your plate was
Mhm.
one of the main aspects to be able to analyze and see if you can take more or not. What is the context with communication? So how are these two linked? Is there a link between them?
I think so, yes, because then let's say that I would give, okay, so this afternoon I'm going to give priority to my daughter, okay, to having the plans that we said we are going to do. And, how do I communicate that if something comes in between? I mean, this is a very basic example. It's very easy to say, I have set aside time for my family, or I'm not able to do this because of this, and I'll be able to do it another time. But then what happens when the situations are not so straightforward? And what I mean by that, so as an employee, you are asked to do something, by your manager, superior, colleague, or, whoever it is in that context. You already have a lot on your plate, but you're scared to say no because you may be fearful of the person that is asking you to do whatever it is they are asking you to do, or perhaps you don't want to seem like someone who is not willing to help. And I think that's a bit of a more trickier situation. So how would one communicate that by safeguarding their position as well?
And this is a great point and possibly even a topic for another
I
broadcast.
think I was thinking exactly the same thing. Yes, yes, definitely.
But if I were to put it in, maybe give a short answer, a short version here, is many times I think communication, as you said, is very important. So just going back to the example that you told your daughter at the time when she came to distract you, she needed something from you, and you told her, "Listen, I really want to spend time with you, but I really need to finish this before." And give me 5 minutes and I'll be with you in 5 minutes. Possibly you could use something similar. So speaking to, let's say, your boss, and I'm going to give the example of your boss because many times it is our boss we feel we cannot say no to,
Yes.
and telling your boss specifically, this is what I'm doing, we're working on this aspect, and this is a very important task that you have come up with, and But you might find the opportunity to say which one is the most important one, which one should we focus on first, what is our priority, and that would help you to realign your priorities. So what I'm not saying, of course, say no to your boss, definitely not, but it's communicating and finding
A balance.
a balance, because it could also be that your boss does not know what you're working on, perhaps has not realized maybe that he's given you some
Very
ideas,
true.
you're still working on them. So definitely, I think honesty is the best policy, and being more open with one another is going to help us to achieve more, just like you did with your daughter.
Mm. This is actually very, very true because oftentimes I assume, I don't know if everyone, but I assume that the other person is a mind reader. um, so I think you've put a very interesting perspective there, is to make our voice heard and have an open conversation about it. Um, and I'll give you a very funny example here. There is this app called 9gag, with lots of funny stuff and what have you. And there was a comment, about a lady who said that, I don't want to hear men that they can't communicate because I heard you describing, when you play online games with your friends in intricate detail about where you are and who's around you, so don't ever say you can't communicate. And then someone commented and they said, well, that's because our teammates, tell us exactly what's happening. They don't say to us, oh, it's fine, forget it, don't even worry about it. So it's a bit like that, it's about um, expressing ourselves. And I think you've made a great point with that, and not to assume that the other person knows what we're doing, what we're working on, what our situation is like, but to generally inform them and have that two-way
This definitely
discussion.
touches on the aspect of emotional intelligence and how we show up, how we come across to others, because how we come across is going to affect how they react back to us. So if we're bottle things in ourselves, and as you said, it's your secret and they don't really know, and how can they know? It's within yourself. But your reactions are showing differently. They're showing maybe that negative behavior.
Indeed. Indeed.
Going back to your actions, what would be your actions for the next month, perhaps?
For the next month, I think to put into practice, you know, the areas I've identified through the exercise of the week, i.e., identifying priorities, how I communicate, and making people aware of the situation. So the following month it would be kind of over a month is to remove one thing that is, completely alien to my priorities, and really have that as a firm no. It's not something that works, because I think we can, or at least I can identify with at least one thing that is there, just it shouldn't be there. Um, to that, and to practice communication, to continue to practice communication, and to improve my interaction with people. Because I think what you've mentioned earlier, Karl, about how you show up, from an emotional intelligence perspective, and how one is perceived, dictates a lot of the interactions that we have with those around us. So for me, for the month would be to be more aware of that, definitely, and to also see how other people are showing up in reverse as well. How they communicate, what are their priorities as well.
Great. So if we were to recap and maybe close the coaching session, so to say, or the part of the coaching session, what are your learning? What are your take-home moments from today?
From today, so the like I said, the first, and this has stuck with me throughout this session, is the pain of not achieving that. Um, I think when I set goals, or when some of us do set goals, it perhaps not be just myself that does that. So we think of the goal as an ideal. So, but we rarely think of the reverse of not achieving that goal because we tend to think on to the positive side. So I hit this goal, I will. So if I want to lose weight, which I should, I'm going to fit into this dress and, I'm going to do that. And it sounds amazing. But then I never thought of the reverse side. If I don't do this, what are the implications on my health, both physical and mental too? So this has been like a very big aha moment for me, like you said, Carl. I never ever looked at the reverse of not achieving a goal, and this is the first time that this has been painfully made aware to me in the best possible way, not in a negative way. The other takeaway, I think it has to do with limitations. As you were running me through this coaching session, I realized that a lot of the limitations were mental roadblocks, that I set for myself because, like I said, the example I gave is social media. We feel compelled to answer. Maybe the other person doesn't even expect an answer for me, but somehow I feel compelled to give it. So it has to do a lot with being aware of your own perceptions and limitations that are perhaps keeping you back from what you want to achieve. And the third thing, which became apparent to me right now at the end, when you said, so what are actions that you're going to take this next week and this month, is accountability and discipline, which I'm a huge fan of. I think motivation is great, but I think discipline is what gets us over the line. So this would be my main takeaways.
Great, Fran. It's really great to have you sharing this. And I see that they will have another comment as well.
Yes, I've
Like
just
we can
noticed it now
look into.
from Romina. It is not always easy to control your emotions in certain situations, and then people perceive you differently. Yeah. What do you
So
think
what
of
I
that?
understand from this is, yes, definitely it's not easy for sure. It does require a lot of effort, I think, and an element of change. But I'm sure that we are all very capable of doing that. Of course, it's what I like to call baby steps at a time. The world wasn't created in one day. The world took its time as well. So it's and this is the beauty of the coaching aspect and also this tool in particular. It's we broke your goal in small steps. We realized why you need to achieve it and what is going to be, so to say, the pain of not achieving it. And then you created, actually, not we, you created step by step. So first you're going to clear or see what's on your plate, so to say. Then you're going to, and the next stage. So
Yeah,
and going back to this, it's identifying what are the emotions that we want to be in control of, and what our maybe perception of people perceiving us differently. And sometimes it's also, I would say, a culture thing as well. Is that sometimes we need to ask more. We need to ask people, what's on your mind, what are you thinking, and let them speak, give them the space.
definitely. I agree with that.
It's a great
It is,
question, Romy. That's a great point, actually.
it is, and it brought me back. How do you, you eat an elephant, piece by piece. So it's kind of the same. We take baby steps towards our goals, and we take it in increments, you know,
Mhm.
and work towards that.
That's right.
Um,
It's just like a child, when we have a child and the child is learning to walk and the child falls on their bottom, we don't hit them and scold them and shout at them because possibly they might not even try to walk again. But we encourage them, we push them, we tell them you can do it. And sometimes we need to have that parent in our brain, so to say, or that person in our brain telling us you can do it, and go for it. And don't worry, it was a little slip and you can do it better.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for the comments, Franco, as well. I found it very informative, and thank you for joining us. We are nearing the end of this mock coaching session. So if you have any questions, please do type them in the comments. If you have followed us through social media, and also be aware that Carl has kindly agreed to offer his precious time um, to someone who will win a one-to-one 90-minute coaching session with the expert himself, Karl. All you need to do to be in the chance of winning is to download this worksheet. This is exactly the same worksheet that we have worked through today in the small coaching session. And once you download it, then on Monday we will randomly pick a winner from the ones of you who have downloaded. Just be completely random. We will announce it on social media, on Facebook and LinkedIn. So if you're not connected with either myself or Karl, you can do so. You can just type in Karl Grech to connect with Karl, or Fran Moisa to connect with myself. But you will also receive an email to notify you that you have indeed won. And then in the one-to-one 90 minutes coaching session with Karl, you can work for your own personal goal, whatever that may be. So we definitely encourage you to do that. Thank you to all who have joined us this morning, and for the interaction. We had a lot of interaction in this session, which is absolutely great. We are very grateful for choosing to spend your Saturday morning with us, and we hope that you've learned something. If you found this useful, please do share it further. You can, even though this has been a live session, it will stay on these pages. So share it with your friends, share it with your connections. The more people we can help, the better. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and the Facebook page so you can be notified of other sessions that we are going to do throughout the year as well. Karl, any last word? Or not last word? That didn't sound right. No, any last word? Anything else you'd like to say before we conclude?
What I must say is thank you, Fran. I really enjoyed the session. I would say it was very similar to a similar coaching session. Of course, just a little bit different because we were live, at a wide audience. So that put in some different aspects to it. But I really enjoyed it, and thank you very much for the invitation. It has been a pleasure to be here.
Absolute pleasure as well. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your Saturday. And remember, bite size, piece by piece. Okay? Slowly, you will get there. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you, Karl.
Thank you.